Hello, everyone. Uh, Good afternoon, and thanks for being here to attend my session. My name is Mrunal Gangrade, and I work for JP Morgan Chase. I am the into identity and access management group at JP Morgan, and I am going to present a topic on multi-tenancy in the clouds. I hope you guys enjoy it. So I will start with the introduction and motivation, then the threat landscape, then I will move on to the technical isolation, monitoring and policy, case study, and then the best practices. So the first is defining multi-tenancy. So before we were introduced to cloud, each organization had their own infrastructure. That is pretty old now. Like they had servers across locations. They had servers in the northwest and the middle west. So if anything goes wrong with one data center, then they had the disaster recovery in the other data center. So it was it was their own infrastructure, which was secure. Obviously, no one can enter that infrastructure, and it was slow, but it was still secure. It had its own challenges, but the one thing about it was that it was secure than the way cloud is now. But moving on, like we got introduced to cloud, and then slowly all the organizations started moving to clouds. So as you all know, like cloud is pretty expensive. Like you can't really have your own infrastructure inside cloud. Then it will beat the whole purpose of having business or whatever. So the thing is, when we move to cloud, there are various benefits of it. It is cost efficient, it is scalable, and the production environment, if you need say for the banks, if there is, or Amazon, if there is an Amazon deal day, it can easily scale up the servers from 10 to 15. So the scalability is achieved within seconds, and that is the benefit of cloud. When all the companies started moving, and then they all started having the benefits of cloud. But with that, there were also challenges. For the first is because of the cost effective, the cloud will give you one environment, and then multiple organizations or even multiple hosts have to deploy themselves on a single host. So that is something which is called as multi-tenant. So when any the provider, say Amazon or even the Google provider, when they give you a space, that same space is actually shared by other organizations without your knowledge. You don't know whether which all organizations are sharing that space. You just sign one contract where you have defined some rules, and you assume that, okay, I'm going to get the security and privacy which I need. But that's not the case. Once especially in the organizations where the data is very critical, like cyber security, then we have the health and the financial. So that is very important, that if any issues come, or if anyone tries to attack the cloud environment, which is very easy because some other company has actually organization, or even the attackers are actually sitting on the same host where you are have deployed your data or their application on that server. So that is the challenges. That strong need for data and execution isolation is one of the challenge which the cloud providers face in the multi-tenant combination. I will walk you. There was a very famous incident with Capital One in 2019. So there was a misconfigured AWS roles. They had the IAM roles, which identity and access management role, which was given like the most privileges. So the attacker they took advantage of the server side forgery to actually get into the space of Capital One. And once they got into, they had the access to the S3 bucket. And they didn't stop there. Like once they had access to that particular S3 bucket, they started moving vertically and tried and later on they had access to several S3 buckets. So that happened because the main rule of IAM, identity and access management, is the least privilege, the rule of least privilege. So that was not considered by them, because I guess that there was a break which the attacker found it, and then that's how they got into the Capital One. So that was one major attack which happened in 2019. So if a big org like Capital One can have that attack, so no one is safe, basically. So that's the main point of this presentation. Then we also have the meltdown, and this is a real world breach, like hardware flaws expose secret between VMs. So what are like virtual machines? I will just start with the basics, like what are virtual machines? So in any big org, like where I'm working or where I previously worked, you don't get a particular hardware. Those days are gone. We get like the host is the same, and they install some hyperware where you get virtual machine. So when you are working on your machine and in the office or something, you feel that you own that machine, but actually it's just a space on the hardware which you have been given to. So the attackers, what they did was, like, since they were exposed to the CPU or the hardware, they found out the traffic on those memory on the CPUs, and also the memory caches. When the memory caches happen, there is a lot of CPU usage. So they found all those things by just like eavesdropping, like just finding the data and how the patterns are on the CPU. They were able to attack that just the hardware of those VMs. So why isolation? So it is like a very basic thing. We need isolation because it prevents data leak across customers. When you go into cloud, or when any org, when it goes into cloud, it expects or it assumes that the data is private, but it's not, because on the same host or same machine you will have several other services also deployed. So it's not really safe, but we need isolation to prevent the data leakage. Also for the privacy, trust and compliance. So customers will need to trust the org in order with their data. So they need to, if any such incidences like Capital One, if they start happening like throughout, then the customers are going to lose their trust. So it's very necessary that you have the critical privacy trust of the customers, because ultimately the business comes from the customers. And then we have penalties from GDPR or HIPAA, or even the finance industry is all regulated. So it's not only about customer trust or data privacy. The companies have to pay billions of dollars to, if there is any breach in the security of any data leakage. So even for that, they have to make sure that their data is protected in the cloud. So that's why, like, we really need isolation. That's the motivation. So threat landscape, how leakage occurs. So misconfiguration, IAM and buckets. So after it goes to cloud, if you're aware of how AWS works, the main thing of AWS is identity and access management. You can define policies, you can define rules and assign it to the accounts, humans, roles. You can have all that. But the rule what everyone should follow is rule of least privilege, like deny everything by default. So even if someone tries to get or already got into your network, but it is denied by default until they assume some roles. So that will be difficult for them to assume. So the leakage occurs, for example, with Capital One, because the IAM role was misconfigured. That was the reason that the attacker was able to get into their network. So misconfiguration of IAM roles is the main reason why the threat occurs. Shared resources like CPU or memory, if there are more containers also on the same shared resources, then the eavesdropping can happen. You can also, the attacker can find out when is the load more on that particular business, and try to load the system during that time. So actually the system will come down. So shared resources, memory resources, CPU and memory resources shared are the main cause of the threat landscape. As I already mentioned, like side channel exploitation is actually eavesdropping, where you actually try to listen to the CPU and memory usage of another application and uh, try to find, like, the attacker will get the insights into when the attack should actually happen, like when is the password caching is going to happen, because during that time there will be like several cache, the CPU usage will go high when the caching actually happens. So that is one of the reason that is one of the example of side channel exploitation. So these are the main reasons why the leakage occurs. Common attacks are VM escapes, where the attacker will find a way to get out of the VM and go to the host. So it has access to other VMs on that particular host. So these are very common attacks. Container breakouts. Container breakouts is similar to VMs breakouts. Like the attacker will try to get out of the container onto the VM, so they can have access to other VMs on the same containers on the same VM. Timing and the cache attacks. That is the example of side channel exploitation, where the attacker will actually eavesdrop on the memory usage and cache timings to get into the system. So these are the threat landscape. I'll move on to the detailed threat time. VM escape, breaking out of VM at the host level. So we have a host where we have several VMs on that host. You can think about an example is like you live in an apartment complex. So your host is the entire apart like the building, and the VMs are the apartments on that building. So say a burglar or someone tries to get out of one apartment and goes and somehow gets the access to the main room. From there, it can actually go get the keys for all the other apartments and get into it. So think about the VMs at smaller apartments and the host as the whole building. So one building is actually hosting several VMs. So if one burglar tries to gets the access to the main room, then it can actually get the keys to all the VMs. So this is just an analogy, like for the breaking out of the VMs on the host level. Second is escape from the container to the host. It's a similar one. It's just at a smaller level. Like VMs, host are having VMs and VMs are having containers. So if the attacker gets out of the containers and onto the VMs, then it can get access to all the other containers. So it can then attack the memory or CPU of those VMs, and it's again a security breach. Side channel is leaking info via CPU and cache artifacts. So in reality, like at least in the applications what I have worked on, the caching happens, like all the credential cachings or whatever happens during certain times of the day. It's not like every time when you go and log in into your system or any critical system, it's not like it goes and gets your credentials or whatever your roles or from the it just matches something and then it gets it from the cache. But there are certain times of the day, as per of whatever is the policy defined, that the caching will happen every 5 hours or 4 hours. So every 4 hours, like, if you have some, for example, if you need to access a external website and that website gives you a token, so you cache that token for 4 hours because you know that after 4 hours it's going to get expired. So caching happens on every system, and the cache is refreshed also like timely. So if the attacker finds out those details as when the caching is going to take place or when the cache is going to get refreshed on the system, then that's going to help the attacker to get into the system. So these are the detailed threat types which happen on normal whenever you deploy your application on cloud. So cloud service model, there are three types. One is the software as a service, that is SaaS, then platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. So software as a service example is like your Gmail, that is a software as a service which you use it, or Salesforce which you use it. So you're not like you're not doing deploying or doing anything with you. You're just using that service. But the security or lies with the provider. So if if Google has an issue, and if it tries, if for some reason the one customer's data gets, exposed to other customer data, then that is, everything is in cloud. So that is a data isolation, and that is a data breach at the software, at a security level, software as a service level. So you can take the example of Gmail, or Salesforce, or whatever apps you use. They are all software as a service. There are organizations which are providing you the software, and you're using it as a service. So they all come under software as a service, but they take care of their data isolation. Like, your data is not shown to another person, or another person's data, you cannot see it unless you are explicitly given rights. Example, on Google Drive, like, you can share it with more than one user. So that's an example of software as a service. Platform as a service is mostly which we use to build within, like, as developer, I'm a developer, so we use it to build our applications. So we use, like, if there is any platform, we use the APIs to build our services based on that. So the breach can happen at API level. You can, as if I'm the attacker, I'm going to try to configure or try to attack the API in such a way that I get out more information out of it. So if the API is not properly secured, like, I can just get, for example, an API, just, it's a very basic example, but if the API is not using any credentials of a role or something, so once you, if I, as a developer, I should not be able to access the HR data because just a developer. So I should have a role assigned um, to my ID. But if that is not there, so once I get into the system, if I can access my data, I can access the HR data also. So it is very important that all the configuration is done properly, so you don't, like, the attackers don't have that benefit of all these misconfiguration which happens in platform as a service or software as a service. Then the last is infrastructure as a service, which is at the very basic level, where the EC2 instances, the VMwares, the host, everything is infrastructure as a service, where we use the AWS EC2 instances, and we deploy our applications. So the configuration is totally the responsibility of the org which is deploying the application. The configuration of the infrastructure is not the much responsibility of the provider. So the responsibility lies with the person. For example, the first one, the SaaS, that is software as a service, Google might be deploying their services on infrastructure. They might be using infrastructure as a service. They might be using EC2 instances to deploy their application, where you can use the Gmail. But the configuration, how they protect their application from the misconfiguration, is totally their responsibility. So there are three service models, cloud. Only if you are, like, working as a developer or something, you really get into, like, infrastructure as a service, or else mostly it's like, software as a service switch. So we have the hardware isolation. There are two types. One is virtualization, and second is TEEs. So hypervisors isolate VMs. So every hardware, like, once you try to isolate the VM, there are hypervisors. So hypervisors will actually isolate the VMs from each other. So as a user, you don't know, like, it is actually multiple VMs on the same host. But as an attacker, you know that there are multiple VMs on the same host. So you can have, like, the phishing becomes very easier in that case, because you can actually attack a system, because as an attacker, as I know that the hypervisor is actually isolating the VMs. I can easily get into the other VMs if I get into the host. So as an attacker, you know that. So there is, Intel SGS and AMD SCV. These are two services what they provide. So in that, you can safeguard your data. So what I can, just an analogy, even if a burglar breaks into your apartment, but if you have a safe lock, they still can't steal your data or your important things, because if they break into your apartment, they have to get access to the safe lock. So if they cannot get access to the safe lock, even if they break into your apartment, your documents or whatever is the important stuff is still safe because it is inside the safe lock. So TEEs are are an example of that, just an analogy. So Intel SGX is the one which provides that, and like it actually safeguards your data. So even if the attacker gets into your virtual machine, you can still safeguard it by using it. So this is one of the way, like hardware isolation, where you can protect your data. There are also other ways where you can do it is namespace and C group partition processes. So namespaces basically, like you define namespaces into your processes. So if there is a process, running in namespace one, and there is a namespace B, like think about it as um, some groups, like minor groups into the container which we create for isolation. That is all. There are VPCs, virtual private connection networks, and all that. It is another level of programming which happens there. So you have those namespaces and C groups partition process, which will actually partition your processes. So even if like have access to one process, for example, restart, there is a just an example, this is called simple Linux server, and you have restart the process, restart the service, and also install the service. So if you have access for some reason you got the access to restart the service, but the install service is still being safeguarded because it is in a separate namespace. So when the architecture is defined, you have to define in such a way that one process does not get access to the other process. Kernel capabilities restrict privileges. So all the VMs are basically like, Linux, or they are Unix machines where a root user has all the access. So if you don't safeguard the root user, then you're going to be in trouble. If anyone tries to get into your Linux machine or your VMware, and if they have the root privileges, then they can even shut down your machine. So kernel capabilities restrict privileges. So there will be separate privileges defined, that is read only, write, executable, and whenever there is a process or a file, you can actually give permissions to that file that only root user will be able to modify, or delete that file, or view that file will be to anyone who gets access. So by that, even if attacker gets into your system, you still can safeguard it. So that's the whole way. Next is like Kubernetes is the container based, which is very much popular now. So it uses the RBAC, that is, and pod security network policies. So it safeguards your application based on RBAC, pod security, and network policies. So we have a VPC, virtual private network, and anybody tries to there are actually rules defined, like who is allowed into your network and who is not allowed into your network. So Kubernetes is a very, right now it is in thing to have your applications containerized. So I was talking about network isolation, that is VPCs. VPC is like, you can think about, you have your, like, previously we used to, like the companies used to have standalone architecture or infrastructure for their own org. So that cannot happen in cloud, because now cloud is like, many organizations share the same cloud. So there's a concept of VPC, that is virtual private cloud. So you define your own virtual cloud inside the bigger cloud where only your org can deploy the changes. So how that cloud is controlled? It is controlled by the IP addresses, the subnets, and the policies, like what is allowed into your system, what is not allowed, even the micro segmentation. For example, the database is the most important part. You will have to safeguard the database. So you have to write a policy in such a way that all the external requests cannot access your database directly. So that is micro segmentation inside your VPC. So those rules have to be defined, like the BPCs, the security groups, all have to be defined, so that there is network isolation. So the main aim of network isolation is making your cloud as private as what you would have on your own premises. So that is the main aim of the network isolation. And software defined parameters, you can actually code your network by defining the policies, the parameters. You can actually give the IP address to where the your network can be accessed. Not all the protocol, whether it's HTTP or TTA, the protocols you can define on the software defined parameters. So only the ones which are allowed will get into your network, and not all. So once we implement that, the major thing is monitoring. We also have to monitor like how everything is going on into the system. So we have to enforce mechanisms. Where I would just, even though like from my real world experience, this is where the AI comes into picture. So because humans are not that equipped to identify abnormal activity, and that's where AI is. Suppose like AI can actually detect that there is a person who has downloaded at 3 a.m. 200 documents. So nobody can actually monitor that except for like AI. It will be easier. Then AI will give an alert to everyone that this is what. So monitoring is where AI can actually help everyone. Regarding the Capital One, the monitoring and the alert was the example what I shared at the beginning. The monitoring and the alert was not that equipped. That's the reason the attacker was able to get into other S3 buckets. So if there was a monitoring or alert during that time, they could have stopped the attacker. So monitoring of the network once you set up is an important step of your cloud security. So there are three main things. One is runtime monitoring of boundary breaches, like continuous surveillance of system to detect unauthorized access attempts, or if anybody even gets into like not normal behavior. If the AI detects, or if anyone detects, like is the normal example is like if you try to use your credit card in some other country, you do get an alert like, okay, your credit card is being used. So that is part of monitoring. So that is how it prevents the threat, or that's how it prevents the attack. I mean, it will just try to find out, okay, it's not you, it's not the correct, I mean, it's not the usual location where you usually swipe your credit card, is being swiped in another country. Is that you? And then you'll have to verify several things. So that is monitoring. Like we have to, all the orgs do it. Once their application is in the cloud or not in the cloud, monitoring has to be there. Then identity and access management and the cybersecurity, they all work together. So rule of least privilege, deny everything by default. So even if an attacker gets into your system, they will get denied by default unless they have the privileged assigned to it, or role assigned to it. The attacker will not be able to do anything. So just because you get into the system doesn't mean you have access to all the data. You will have to have access. You have to assume roles, and that's what all cloud is about. As I said, like the behavior analysis to detect threats. If someone is like at 3 a.m., if someone is trying to download like hundreds of documents, then that is definitely a threat. You will at least try to analyze that why someone at 3 a.m. is trying to do that, or the card is getting swiped in another country or at several locations in the midnight. So that is the behavioral analytics, which is part of monitoring and which will safeguard the application. So Capital One, I guess this is, I have already mentioned it n number of times during this, but that is one case study, the real world case study, that server-side request forgery attack took advantage of the misconfigured. So the APIs are an example of the server-side forgery, where URL is exposed to the end user, and they can actually, change the URL, change the permissions. You can directly hit the URL if that is not safeguarded. So that's the reason, we safeguard the URL that only authorized users can access it, either by a token or someone. But these are all the server-side forgery which happened on the Capital One. Once inside, the attacker was able to you access extensive Amazon S3 data storage behind the initial target scope. So the gaps were least privilege, insufficient implementation, inadequate monitoring system, and delayed alerting mechanisms. So monitoring and alerting also plays part. So by whatever, like if at all your system gets attacked, it has to be alerted. Like the org or the owners have to be alerted that this is what is happening. So if that is delayed, then the attackers have more time to cause problem into your system. So monitoring and alerting is also one of the important points. So the lessons what we learned from the Capital One was that enforce least privilege, default deny policies. So this is a very important policy in any cloud, like default deny by default. That is what everyone follows these days. That is deny by default. Just because you have an ID, you doesn't mean that you have access. It's just like deny by default. In the beginning, all your access is denied. You have to explicitly request for access, and also a policy of least privilege. If there is a if you are part of two groups, for example, I'm just giving you an example. If you're part of two groups and one is denying you access to the same resource, then it is denied by default. Anything which is denied, it is denied by default. Then there has to be automatic scan, deploy automatic scanning tools like AI or anything which will work into your system, which will monitor it for you. And if they see any unexpected behavior, that will also, uh, alert everyone in the org. And basically, the goal is to establish 24 by 7 monitoring. Even when you're not looking, somebody is looking into it. So the future and the best practices is zero trust, confidential computing. So we just have to have zero trust. Don't trust anyone. Automate the security poster reviews. Everything has to be automated. Even when you're not looking, somebody is looking. There has to be a 24 by 7 monitoring. AI driven detection, which is very helpful, because humans have certain restrictions which AI does not have those restrictions. So AI driven anomaly detection is one of the emerging technologies. And then we have the RegTech for compliance mapping. We have GDPR, HIPAA, CCPA directly getting combined with the organizations. So they are regulated as per the whatever is their specifications. So they actually integrate with the organizations. Depending on, like, if it is health, then they will integrate with HIPAA. So do you have any questions? Yeah.
Like like you can actually put tools on the DC.
Yes.
Yeah. The big issue that I think security is facing right now is thinking like every day your elastic keep stock with that application that can't necessarily take those tools. Uh, any suggestions on the best way to real time monitor of those environments? A lot of times, perhaps some people go to the AWS, it's easy for people to see. They're doing everything they're supposed to. A lot of the time, we're waiting for Amazon to send you an email saying, hey, you notice this anomaly. And just looking at a better way to do that, because the way a lot of security tools are doing it now, is they'll check the registry of the base image, but that doesn't mean that's really what's happening with what is a Kubernetes cluster. So like I said, just looking for suggestions for best practices for anything in your experience representing those. I up to date with the platform.
Yeah, it is. This answer is based like purely on my experience. What I believe is, like safeguarding your security at the base level, like your the inbound policies and the outbound policies. That also helps, even if your application is containerized, but it is actually on the VMs or into your the virtual cloud. So if you safeguard at the base level, that you actually have a control over who can access your application or who cannot application access your application, that is one of the important thing which I feel. And regarding what the problem what you said, I think we should really integrate AI, because that is like the real, we have the Gen AI and all. So that we should actually come up, at least for the finance industry, the models should be trained. We have a lot of models, like they should be trained based on the real time data. And the monitoring is something which the monitoring is something which we have to like I think that can really help with the monitoring, the genetic AI, if it is integrated.
When you're talking about escape, most of the attacks happen hardware layer.
I think it's more on the virtualization layer. Yeah. Hardware is still easier to safeguard, but the other, like the exposing point of the virtualization is more like you have APIs, you have several exposing points, but hardware is limited. That information is not easily available to attack. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question. I would just like to tell that my organization and come from a financial background, just like healthcare and finance, they are the main business industries. They have not moved completely to cloud because of the same reason. There is still premises a lot, which where the critical data or they are still there. They are doing a hybrid, but they have still not moved there. But the one which I can think is like my organization. They also started with their in-house cloud. So with in-house cloud, they were trying to, I would not say some of the applications are on the public cloud also, but then that is safeguarded by using the VPCs or having your own virtual private cloud. Yeah. 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 I think you had a question. Yeah. Yeah, I did. I mean, I don't have the exact in my. I did have it when I was studying this, but I don't have the exact details of what happened. But I can get back to you with the details. There is like not on a whole level where you can actually, but that is a common point where the attackers try to get into the system. Okay, I'll take that point. I'll look into that. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll check that. Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah.
But also, but CSPMs also, like, it loves, oh, So we need, you know, work with, but I did have a question. Maybe you're like during the program at your organization, do you concentrate more on the shift left approach, where you're breaking builds on, let's say, misconfigured deployments?
He's from my org too. Do you want to answer that? Yeah.
Or are you going more into like production vulnerabilities where you're using CSP platform? It's a hybrid approach. They definitely thinking shift left.
Yeah.
That brings the things to developer IAE and kind of solve the problem before it gets released to production. But that's a journey altogether.
Yeah. It's still like we are more on-prem. We are just moving there. But as you know, like finance is the most secure data, so it's not a complete shift.
Are you blocking builds since you are trying to start like
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
Isolation of the regions. And you notice the people started a trend moving away from Microsoft hypervisor, Microsoft products towards other two, like a large trend. That
From moving away from microsite hypervisors.
ditch Windows and move to something else.
No, at least not I have. I worked with Citigroup and JP Morgan. I didn't see that trend there. They're still there. Yeah, they're still there. This is my LinkedIn. If anyone has any questions or email, I'll get back to you. um, yeah. Uh, Monitoring, AI-driven monitoring. For network monitoring, I mean, not that I'm actively working on that part, but I'm also a, like independent researcher. So as per whatever is my research, I would try to, I mean, I would go with agentic AI and explainable AI more also because explainable AI is also becoming a larger trend, at least in healthcare and finance, because ultimately all the regulators want to know that how particular decision was reached. Like, for example, you can't just deny, like, if you put it more monitoring and say the agentic AI or someone just says that your card is denied. And if someone asks you like why the card was denied and there is no explanation, then it is. So I would go with a combination of agentic AI and explainable AI. Yeah. Yeah, that's a problem. I don't, that's why I guess we don't have more finance or healthcare yet moving to. That is the shift that is not happening actually in finance and healthcare. If you look at the overall trend in the industry, it is happening all over. But finance and healthcare and insurance are the three industries which are not moving that fast to the AI. Because it's like a black box. Once you move to AI, if you're not able to explain why it happened, then nobody is going to believe. And ultimately, the customers have to trust you. So the shift is not in other industries, it is, but in these three industries, I'm seeing that the shift is not that fast. Yeah. Is Are there any questions? Thank you.